So good evening, all. I think we had an excellent discussion and excellent talks by both the speakers, and I'll be speaking on dural AV fistulas. So interestingly, dural AV fistulas are one which are not congenital. They are the ones which are acquired arteriovenous malformations, and they are interestingly the consequence of arterial ingrowth into the thrombus of a occluded vein. So this is very different from any other malformation in the brain, especially a vascular malformation. And because of this, because of the ingrowth of meningeal vessels inside the dura, they lead to a kind of a AV shunt within days of the thrombus formation. So we are not talking about weeks or months. We are talking about days after venous thrombosis of a dural AV fistula. So almost 10% of all intracranial vascular malformations are dural AV fistulas. And while the majority are benign, the presence of retrograde venous drainage, which signifies intracranial hypertension, may change the natural course of this disease and may risk in high risk of hemorrhage, neurological injury, and mortality. Evaluation, obviously, because there are acquired lesion with venous sinus thrombosis or venous thrombosis, hematological and coagulation workup is required to find out the cause of the thrombosis. And besides this, we need to do a radiological workup where the initial test of choice is the MRI. When we talk about MRI, we have the SWI sequences and the MRA to delineate the thrombosis and the other vascular pathology. CTA is also sometimes used, but not that routinely. And finally, for the gold standard, we have obviously the DSA, which gives us additional information on whatever the lesion is, arterial and the venous supply. So there are two common classifications as opposed to what Manjul showed. So many classifications. We have just two classifications for dural AV fistulas, and we have the Borden and the cognate classification. What is important to know here is that the type 1 in both and the type 2 in the cognate, they are the ones without, I would say, venous hypertension. And these are considered benign lesions. Anything else is considered a more aggressive dural AV fistula. Here I can show you, if you see this first image, you can see there is a sinus thrombosis in the transverse sinus. This is a 21-year-old girl who developed this spontaneously. And the second B image is one which was, and the MRA which was done just 10 days later, which shows there's a beading out here with some kind of a initial dural AV fistula formation. This C image shows 3 months down the line, a full-fledged dural AV fistula, which has become very apparent down the course at 10 months of follow-up. So we can see how rapidly these dural AV fistulas evolve over time. And if left untreated, they may become quite problematic for the patient. Routinely, most of the dural AV fistulas are benign, as I said, do not require any urgent intervention. However, there are two indications for emergency intervention. One is obviously if there's a hemorrhage with signs of venous hypertension. And the second is when you have parenchymal edema or pending venous infarction, along with progressive neurological deterioration in terms of deficits or sensorium. So these two would warrant some kind of either a surgical or an endovascular therapy. Interestingly, I found a couple of articles on compression therapy from the late 80s. And in this, as you can read here, the compression of the ipsilateral carotid artery or the occipital artery, if you do it by hand 3 times a day, 20 to 30% of these dural AV fistulas will resolve. So it shows that there is a lot to learn about the etiopathogenesis and how the change in flow may further aggravate or decrease these dural AV fistulas. Treatment options, as been discussing throughout the last two talks, also remain endovascular surgery and radiosurgery. It depends on what paper you read and who is writing the paper, what is promoted as the best treatment. And till recently, endovascular was considered the gold standard, but things have changed after more and more. I think neurosurgeons are doing radiosurgery. So, radiosurgery has picked up. Surgery has always remained behind because obviously uh, most of these lesions are near the transverse sigmoid junction. There is a lot of neovascularization. It's a difficult surgery, and surgeons tend to refer for endovascular or radiosurgery. However, having said that, endovascular is also not considered the gold standard anywhere now. And because a few papers have shown that it is the best, it does not mean that in everybody's hands it remains the best. And as Manjul also showed, not everybody is a Michelangelo. There are few people who can do very good endovascular, but most of the time, it depends on personal experience as well as the expertise of the endovascular surgeon. And I was trying to review the endovascular and the surgical outcomes from India. And interestingly, I searched from 1960 to 2024, and there is not a single article on dural AV fistulas regarding outcome from any major series, either endovascular or surgical. When we talk about radiosurgery, obviously it is more consistent. You can obviously have papers across different institutions to assess the outcome measures. The most critical part in radiosurgery is identifying the fistula, or the technically what we might call the nidus in this case. And this remains the crux. If we do not identify it properly, then obviously you will be giving a target or making a target which is different from the actual one. As in AVMs, the 50% isodose is kept 20 grays or above. And different papers have shown that all complication rates are extremely low. The rate of hemorrhage, neurological deficit, mortality, everything is less than 1%. So it is a very, very safe procedure, especially for those patients who do not have venous hypertension. So this is again a young patient who had a transverse sigmoid junction dural AV fistula, which is, you can see here nicely. And this was this was the second imaging done during gamma knife, where on the MRI, which we usually do, we can see this lesion out here. And the marking of this, obviously, we always get the DSA also done. So the marking is important here to delineate the whole of the, I would say, the dural AV fistula. And we actually published our paper on our series. The problem with dural AV fistulas is, although they constitute 10% of all the vascular malformations, most of them are asymptomatic and they do not present. And whoever presents are taken up by the endovascular surgeons. So over a 10-year period, we had 5 patients who we did radiosurgery. And these were the patients dural AV fistula without venous hypertension. So they are a good grade patients. And we had a follow-up of 24 months. And all patients had obliteration within 24 months. So it's an excellent modality for these patients. However, when we come to dural AV fistulas with venous reflex, this is an entirely different subset of patients where venous hypertension causes obviously a lot of attendant morbidities. And we have been fortunate to even do a lot of these patients. And as you can see here, we have this again a transverse sigmoid junction dural AV fistula, which we could treat. And we again published our paper. This, I think we have the only papers from India. And interestingly, this paper we also was in collaboration with the Dr. N.K. Mishra, who was the head of neuroradiology. So we could compare the outcomes of our radiosurgical cases with the outcomes of embolization done by him. And we had 35 patients. Again, the majority were in the embolization group and 9 in the gamma knife group. Again, we had a mean follow-up of 24 months. And interestingly, the clinical improvement was much greater in those patients who received gamma knife as compared to those who underwent embolization. The overall obliteration rate was similar in both the groups over these last follow-up. So this shows that gamma knife obviously can result in better clinical improvement and decrease in the venous reflux, which somehow embolization fails to do to that extent. To conclude, radiosurgery, I think, is an excellent option, and a lot of papers have also shown it. And for both dural AV fistulas without venous reflux and for dural AV fistulas with reflux. Finally, I think the most important point which I want to make, and which I think both Dr. Manmohan and the rest of the group have made here, is that the decision should be patient-centric and relevant to the center and the department, depending on their experience, where this decision making is being done. Thank you. I think your comments are very valid. If the patient has had a bleed, and at that time, and as I said, there are two emergent conditions which I already mentioned. One is patient having a bleed with intracranial hypertension, venous reflux. Then definitely endovascular therapy may just close the or plug the fistula and help reversal of the intracranial hypertension. The second, as I said, is when the patient is having progressive neurological deficits or altered sensorium. At that time, again, endovascular therapy is always better. But
Yeah.
other than that, what we have found is that gamma knife is equally or better than endovascular therapy. I
Yes.
think that is, as I mentioned also, that is the critical part, very difficult sometimes. And if you look at the endovascular management, dural AV fistula is one where both transvenous or arterial you can manage the fistula. So it is not that if you block the venous side, the patient is suddenly going to bleed. It is possible that if you block the venous side also, the patient is going to improve and the dural AV fistula is going to be closed off. So coming back to the nidus, sometimes when we are not able to delineate it properly, sometimes it's very nicely visible, like you're doing for a AVM. You can see those small, the arterial side dots on T2 as well as on the contrast, so you can mark it easily. But if you're not able to see them nicely, what I do is I take both the arterial and the venous side and cover the whole thing up. So because it's already thrombosed or recanalized, taking both gives a higher chance of, I would say, success in these cases. But this is a problem which has the experts are having problems with across the world to actually find the right point. In terms of surgical, I think it is just the surgeon's experience. When you are, because most commonly we see them at the transverse sigmoid junction. And when there's a lot of neovascularization around this area, you might miss out the normal vasculature because there are so many vessels. Nobody wants to take a normal vessel and obviously cause significant complications. So I think that is the major bottleneck. However, having said that, if you have, we have very little experience in the surgical part, despite, I don't know what is the reason. In my last 20 odd years, we have hardly operated 2 3 patients near the tentorium, and those were the patients which has failed embolization, repeatedly becoming malignant kind of dural AV fistulas. So we had gone in and then just coagulated the dura. So it's a relatively simple procedure when you talk about surgically coagulating the dura, but this is at the last ditch effort. So we are not really, patient is having malignant hypertension and failed embolization. So at that time we had gone in, but I think with radiosurgery, the risk benefit is definitely very good, and the patient also prefers it. So there are so many things working towards the patient that it can be obviously considered better than surgery or even for embolization. Agree. And we always, take the neurologist along. We ask them to mark on the DSA also. We have a discussion. So then obviously it's our final call, but their marking also gives a confidence boost. This is the most likely area in those patients where we are not able to see it properly. There are two things. Yes, very good questions. First is in patients with dural AV fistulas without venous hypertension, that is without venous reflux. I showed the first series. Their 100% obliteration at 24 months. Why we are saying 24 months? Because we got the first DSA done at 24 months. So the obliteration could have been done much earlier because they obliterate very fast. And because both studies were part of thesis, that is why we were getting the DSA early. Otherwise, we get a first DSA also done at 4 years. We don't get it done at 2 years.
Okay.
So for the second study, when we got the DSA done at 2 years, we had a 57% obliteration rate. And if we followed those patients up because the actual DSA should have been done at 4 years. And there, I think the obliteration rate was more than 80%. So they have a very good obliteration rate, much better than a AVM. And for the hemorrhage, because our numbers are very low, we had just 5 and 7 patients, something like that. So we didn't get any hemorrhage, but because the numbers are low, we cannot comment on that. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And endovascular becomes more and more problematic for the second procedure to be done because the stenosis and it progressively stenoses more, provided you put glue or onyx or whatever inside it. So for the second procedure, they are not also interested in doing. So after failed embolization, also they will send the patient to you to do the radiosurgery for these patients.